Burnett, 2020 saw the lowest level of U.S. births in more than 40 years. That's according to recent data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. At the beginning of the pandemic, some wondered if there would be a baby boom as couples waited out the quarantine, but early evidence shows the pandemic may have had the opposite effect. According to the CDC, the birth rate is so low that more people are dying each day than are being born. And joining us to discuss what this means is Christine Percheski, an associate professor of sociology at Northwestern who studies demographic changes. Professor Percheski, welcome to Chicago tonight.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
All right, so first, births declined 4% last year over 2019. Your initial reaction to these numbers?
It's not surprising. This is the sixth year in a row we've seen a decline, and the declines were biggest among the youngest mothers. So we had a very sharp decline among teen mothers, and that's continuing a trend that's about 15 years old now. And most of us think that's good news. The news that's more mixed is about the declines among older mothers, mothers in their 20s and 30s. And some people see that as a bad thing, but I don't think we need to panic about it.
All right, and I want to get to those demographic breakdowns in a bit, but you know, at the beginning, as we mentioned, folks thought everyone staying home, there would be a baby boom. In fact, we saw the opposite. Why do you think the pandemic had that effect?
Yes, well, the pandemic wasn't a snowstorm, right? It caused severe unemployment, a lot of loss of life, as we know. Young couples who might have been having a second or third child were suddenly left with no daycare, no school for their school-aged kids. They might have lost a job themselves. They might have lost a parent or a grandparent to COVID. So this isn't the kind of situation that makes people confident about taking on another responsibility or bringing a baby into the world.
All right, I want to dig into some of the demographics that you just brought up. Birth rates, as we mentioned, fell by 4% last year over 2019. They fell the most sharply among 15 to 17-year-olds at 6%, and then among 18 to 19-year-olds, 7%, while birth rates declined the least at the upper end of the age bracket. So you mentioned you feel positive about that decline in the lower end. You feel kind of mixed about that decline in the older end. First of all, what do you think is behind those trends, and why feel the way you do about it?
Right, yes. So we've seen a decline in teen births for a while now, and most of us think that's good news. In the contemporary U.S., most teenagers are not prepared to have a child. So most public health people, most people in the community think that's probably a good thing. You know, among moms at older ages, I would raise the question, is that what the moms or the couples or the individual women want? And so we're hearing, some women say they're not having as many children or delaying the start of a family because of economic reasons, staggering student debt, unstable employment. And so most of us would think, well, that's really unfortunate that people can't have their babies when they want to. On the other hand, a lot of women are also delaying so that they can develop their career, pursue more education, and that's more neutral or maybe even a good thing, right? So when we look at these numbers, we have to think about what are the individual stories behind them, and a declining birth rate is not per se a bad thing.
And do you see any differences in the demographics in terms of white population versus populations of color?
Yeah, we've seen declines across all population groups here. And there are interesting different sort of sub-stories, but I think the two main themes cutting across groups is a story about women delaying for more education, for employment opportunities, but also women and couples feeling constrained by economic uncertainty or student debt.
And so that goes across demographic. And there's some concern here that the U.S. has fallen below the replacement rate, and this is a trend over many years here, aka more people dying than being born. Is that something that we should be concerned about?
I don't think so. The U.S. has been mostly below the replacement rate since the early 1970s. We don't have to be concerned about that per se. I think one of the things we have to be mindful of, though, is making our public policies appropriately. So, for instance, when we're thinking about Social Security benefits, we need to accurately be estimating how long people will live and how many workers will be in the next generation. So it's not that we have to be concerned, it's that we have to appropriately target our public policies to adjust to these changes.
And those are certainly difficult calculations for policymakers and actuaries right now. You know, typically in recessions throughout history, there is sort of a downturn initially, and then as the economy recovers, there's an upturn. It didn't happen after the Great Recession in terms of an upturn in births. Do you expect it to happen this time? And if it doesn't, what does that tell you?
Right. Well, part of what we're seeing is a shift in the age at which women have their babies. And so what we won't know until later is whether the women who were, just starting their careers when the Great Recession hit, whether they're going to make up those births later in their late 30s, let's say, or mid or late 30s, or whether they'll just have fewer children. So we didn't see this immediate bump, but it doesn't mean that those women will have fewer babies over their lifetime. We just don't know yet. So it's going to take a little while before we'll see this. I would expect that, the number of births in 2021 and probably 2022 will be low, though, given the pandemic and the ongoing economic uncertainty.
And in the last 30 seconds we have here, do you see the long-term trend continuing on that route? As you said, we've been below the replacement rate since the 70s.
Yes. I mean, I don't think we'll get... Yes, I think we'll still have, most women will have 1 or 2 babies. Some women will have 3, some will have 0. But we're still on the higher end of most industrialized countries, and I don't expect to see that to change too dramatically too quickly.
All right. Well, a lot to discuss. Very interesting discussion. And our thanks to Professor Christine Percheski. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.